All right, guys, welcome to episode number 3 of Whiteboard Wednesday. Super excited to have you guys joining us. So the last 2 episodes that we've done is we've gone through some different terms and acronyms and what their definitions are. And so today what we wanted to do is actually get into what that actually looks like. So we're going to be talking about what is due diligence today. So that's the topic of today's video, is what is due diligence. So due diligence, what it means, and how that actually plays out. So essentially, due diligence is the process in a real estate transaction where the buyer verifies the information that they've received either from the seller or from their own research, and also confirms that they're in a position to buy and that the seller is in a position to sell. So there's a couple of things to keep in mind, but we're going to run through those really quickly. And again, if you have any questions, drop us a comment. If you're watching this live, we'll try to answer we'll go ahead and answer your question right away. If you're not catching this live and you're watching this afterwards, that's fine. Just drop a comment in as well. We'll go ahead and answer it then anyway. So what is due diligence? So due diligence is typically a time period. It can vary from anywhere from, say, 1 day to 45, 60 days. It just depends on the transaction. And that time frame is used by the buyer to determine if they're actually able to purchase the property, or if they still want to purchase the property. And so there's a lot of variables that go into that, and that kind of depends on what you're buying or what the transaction is. So for instance, due diligence on a house, on a single family, traditional stick-built house, is going to be shorter than on a commercial piece of property that, say, has 10 different offices in there and you're verifying different things. So the more complex the property, the longer the due diligence period typically is. So let's talk about that. So what's a normal time frame? So here's the important thing. There's nothing really normal as far as time frames go. I think you're going to talk to different people and they're going to give you different recommendations. We've seen a lot on just traditional retail sales is due diligence time periods that are in that 20 to 45 range. And again, it's going to vary a little bit, but that's, the last couple of months, that's what we've seen to be a common thing for just single family houses. And that, again, is going to vary. If you're working with an agent, ask them what they've seen to have been a normal time frame, and then they'll be able to give you some guidance on how much due diligence to ask for if you're the buyer, and how much due diligence you should allow a buyer to have if you're the seller. So make sure you're surrounded by good people who are giving you good advice on to determine what's an appropriate time frame for the due diligence, okay? So what's something else that goes into due diligence? For one, so if you're buying a house and it's your primary residence, even if it's an investment property, something that can play into it is insurance. So this is important here in Western North Carolina, Asheville area. You want to make sure, depending where you're at, you might need flood insurance. And depending what the flood insurance is, your numbers might be very different from what you anticipated them to be when you're going into the buying process. So during the due diligence period, something that's going to be looked at a lot of times is insurance. Another one, which is very typical, is appraisal. You're going to go ahead and get an appraisal. So if you're working with a bank or if you're getting a traditional mortgage, more often than not, they're going to ask for an appraisal to be done during the due diligence period so that the value of the house matches up with the loan amount that you're getting from the lending institution, whether that's credit union, mortgage broker, or traditional bank, etc. So they're going to get an appraisal, and we'll get into that on a different episode, what that actually looks like. So coming soon on another Whiteboard Wednesday will be what an appraisal actually looks like. And then something else that we're going to do is also going to be doing the home inspection. So home inspection. So you're going to have a home inspector come out to your house. If you're the seller, the buyer will be paying for this. And they'll go, and they're basically going to go through your property with just a magnifying glass, and they're going to give the buyer a report with everything that is either wrong or possibly could be wrong. So the newer the house, the smaller the inspection report should be in theory. The older the house, typically the longer or bulkier that information is. And this can be from everything from, hey, there's a leak in the roof, to, this outlet isn't wired correctly, or the window doesn't shut all the way. So it can get into a lot of minutia, and it can also be some major things like, hey, the foundation of the house is totally messed up and it's not really super safe. So that's going to also happen during the due diligence period. And then the last thing that is also, if you're working with a traditional lender, this is important, is you'll get your final details for your loan squared away. So your funding or your mortgage is going to get ironed out at that point. So as you're working through the due diligence period, just remember it is a little bit of a lengthy process. As long as your paperwork is in order as a seller, and then all of this is going to be done by the buyer. The insurance, the appraisal, home inspection, their funding is going to be done. And the only piece as a seller that you typically have to worry about is the title report. And if you're listing the property, you're working with an agent, they're going to typically make sure that you're squared away and that you've got clean title before you go and list the property. If you're doing it for sale by owner, I'd encourage you to reach out and talk to an attorney ahead of time and make sure you have clean title, because you don't want to get through all of this process, get really excited about somebody offering you the number you wanted to on your property, and then finding out that there's some paperwork issue that you have to get squared away before you can actually close on the property. So here's the time frame. That's what due diligence is. If you have any questions, let us know. Once again, this is Whiteboard Wednesday number 3. Make sure you can connect with us here on Facebook. Share this video with somebody. Tag somebody in it who needs to know this information. We're also on Instagram, so look forward to connecting with you guys across social media. Thanks for tuning in.